Circumcision. So this is something that I think historically everyone in Judaism has done it, but I've been talking to sort of younger, more liberal Jews recently who disagree with it, or who liken it to, FGM and that stuff. And so what is your take on it? Do you have a kind of particular opinion? Is this something you've thought about?
Yeah, it is. Definitely thought about. I was even thinking about doing a debate at some point on the subject on JTV, but I decided against it, partly because I realised that for most Jewish people it's actually not an issue that they are contending with. And in some ways I don't really want to introduce a debate which wasn't a debate for most Jews. And it's fascinating that even let's say the most non-observant and uncommitted Jews, so many of them still decide to do a few things throughout the year or throughout a lifetime. Circumcision, Passover Seder for some reason, and often they're fasting on Yom Kippur. And it's interesting that we sort of have within us this deep commitment to that.
These two may or may not know about those things. I'm not sure.
So Passover and such things.
Yes.
Yeah. So Passover is a annual Jewish festival which commemorates the liberation of the Jews from slavery in Egypt, and sort of God taking them out and them entering this relationship with God. And Yom Kippur is a festival actually. It's not considered a sad day. It's a happy day in which it's known as the Day of Atonement, when Jews fast for a day, just over one day, and it's a day to sort of introspect and reflect on the previous year and look forward to the coming year. But many Jewish people, regardless of their levels of observance, they still seem to commit to these things. But this particular question around circumcision and whether should one support, be against it, is it considered problematic? It's quite funny. I actually saw a debate with, do you know Christopher Hitchens? He's he passed away, but very famous atheist, and strong secularist, and quite strong on all that. And he was debating with a rabbi on the question of circumcision. He was saying it's mutilation, it's outrageous, it's wrong, and it has all these unfair side effects, and let's say lessens sexual pleasure, all these things. The rabbi said, actually, as far as I'm aware, the only side effect that I know of in terms of circumcision is that it dramatically increases your chances of winning a Nobel Prize, which I thought was very funny. But so let's just say that there were side effects. I'm not. Some people even say there's positive potential health benefits, and that's why some people even elect to do it. Certainly, there are both non-Jewish people who aren't religious, and also religious people of other faiths, Muslims, for example, who also practice it. It's very widespread, and also I don't think there's any dramatic level of, let's say, difference in terms of sensation and pleasure that might be, because I don't think it's comparable to FGM, which literally removes that the kind of sensation and any kind of enjoyment which is important for physical intimacy and relationships. So it doesn't do that. It may have make some things, let's say, a little bit less pleasurable, if that's possible. But in terms of a dramatic change, I'm not convinced. And it's important to appreciate also the symbolism behind it. Before I do, I would say that before I even offer my opinion on it, as a practicing observant Jew, if God said, do this for me, I need you to do this, in an ideal world, and ideally, I would say, okay, that's what my Creator needs me to do. So I would do it. So say, well, what's your opinion of it? Well, it's like if you have a spouse that says, it really matters to me when you, let's say, I don't know, come home early or don't work on the weekends, or put your shoes in this area or that. Something that, to me, and you say, well, what's your opinion on that? In some ways, it's a bit irrelevant. My partner needs this of me, so I'll do it for them. Now, this is the Jewish people's relationship with their God is not meant to be some kind of tyrannical relationship. So we wouldn't expect that a God who we define as being all good and all these things would demand of us something that would be in any way detrimental to us or painful to us. We have that. There's a level of trust there. But even if there is some level of, let's say, sacrifice, which I don't think is dramatic in terms of circumcision, but even if there is a bit of that, there's something very symbolic in that. It's no accident, by the way, that this is the first thing commanded of a Jewish male when they're born. The circumcision is meant to happen when the Jewish male is 8 days old. And it's something that it's actually seen as quite severe if it's not done. Like in some ways, there's a level in which you're cut off spiritually from the Jewish people by a male not being circumcised. And the reason for, of course, a Jew is a Jew is a Jew always, but the symbolism and its importance is so significant. And part of what I think is going on is that Judaism is not a religion that's an ascetic religion that says you should refrain from the physical pleasures of this world, that you should not be involved in this world, that if you want to be spiritual, you should sit on a mountain and shut yourself off and be like a monk. It doesn't say that, but it does say that we should channel all our involvement in the world and all our engagement in physical pleasure and the wonders of the world into, let's say, good causes and ways that can elevate us. So when it comes to, particularly around when it comes to the sexual drive, it's not in any way, it's celebrated in Judaism, but it's said this is something that needs to be channeled into a marriage and to building a relationship and creating a family. And we know that all the kinds of wonderful implications that come from that. And so it's about saying that the circumcision is basically saying that we're not going to be led by our physical drives. Rather, our head is going to rule, and we're going to take our values and channel all the physical drives into holy and positive and constructive things. Because sometimes we know, think about all these scandals that we see among celebrities and in the news, we know that without having a level of control, a principled control of these drives, people can do things deeply regrettable and deeply wrong because they just can't control it. So the circumcision is symbolizes this idea that we're not going to be controlled by our drives, rather that we're going to control them, we're going to channel them in the appropriate way. And even if there is a little bit of a sacrifice, even in terms of there's pain for the baby, let's say, even though the nerve endings haven't even fully developed at 8 years old, but even if, let's say, there is some level of, let's say, pleasure reduction, there's also something, I think, powerful and symbolic in saying that my life isn't just about getting as much pleasure as possible, but actually it's about serving, it's about leading a life of values and purpose and making a difference. And if that means at times my personal selfish pleasure is going to be lessened a little bit, so be it. But actually, Judaism teaches actually the highest level of pleasure anyway is one in which you're serving, you're not focused on yourself. And it's funny, psychologists are actually starting to catch up on this now and realize that there's not much difference between thinking about your own needs and problems and just depression. And so when at the very end of the Torah, it's interesting, it's one of the first commandments is circumcision in the Torah, but at the very end of the Torah, Moses is speaking to the Jewish people. They're about to enter the promised land, and he says to them, here's how your history is going to work. You're going to be in the land for a bit, you're going to be sovereign, you're going to have your own temple, but then soon after that, you're going to get dispersed, you're going to be exiled, you're going to be wandering the earth, it's going to be very, very difficult, you're going to be persecuted, and it's going to be a very, very challenging time. So it's almost a little bit of a depressing speech. But then Moses continues by saying, so here's my advice to you. Choose life. So what does he mean by that? What does it mean to choose life? What, to breathe and just sit? What do you mean? What, are you saying don't commit suicide? No, it's something deeper than that. There's two types of living. There's your existence, and then there's the quality of your life. So your existence is the things that happen to you and how comfortable you are. What level of health do you have? What level of relationships do you have? Do you have a nice house? Do you have a nice job? Do you have a nice, selfish comfort, all these things that affect you. But existence is just about the space you take up and how comfortable you are in that space. Then the quality of your life is What is the contribution that my existence is making to the world around me? It's not about me, it's about how is it impacting everyone else. It's all very well that I'm taking up space, but so for example, I'm in this room right now, and let's say I'm on my own. Now I've got all this room to myself, it's just for me. I have a very nice existence. Now you all come in and you ruin my existence, because now you're all taking up space as well, and it's not just about me anymore. But now I have the chance to have a life, because I have the ability to have a relationship with you. Now, having a life, the more life you have, means the less you're focused on your own existence, the less you're focused on your own needs. It's basically, you can be in one camp or the other, and the more you're in one camp, the less there's time for the other camp, or vice versa. So the more you're outwardly focused, the more you're focused on how can I serve, what can I do, what am I needed for, the less time you have to focus on your needs and your own pleasures and desires and the rest of it. Which Judaism teaches is actually a much happier way of living. So what Moses was saying to the Jewish people is he said, you're not going to have a great existence for a lot of your history in exile. So instead, don't focus on your existence. Focus instead on living, l'chaim, to life. Focus instead on the contribution you can make to the world around you. And I think that's really symbolic in circumcision. It's not removing sexual pleasure in the way that FGM does. And that's why Judaism doesn't warrant it. But it's about saying life is not going to be just about me. I'm going to transcend myself. And in the process, we'll be a lot happier and a lot more fulfilled.
Hi everybody, if you've made it this far into the video, first of all, thank you. I want to share with you that after I gave this answer and the talk was over, the person that asked this question came up to me and asked a follow-up question. They said, well, that's a very interesting answer, but do you have any sense of why this doesn't apply to women? You know, there's no equivalent. Is there an equivalent? And if not, why not in terms of commandment? Because men have circumcision. And I wanted to share with you some of my reflections on why that may be. This is more speculation, but it's based on things that I've learned from my rabbis and teachers. And I wonder, I suspect that part of the reason is that men have this commandment and not women is because I think women have this inherent understanding that they should focus less on what they need and more on what's needed of them and who needs them. It's more inbuilt into the women. In some ways, women have much less of an ego. They have a lot less correcting to do on that front. They're much less self-centered. They have a more natural understanding. In fact, even built into them biologically. If you want to maybe find an equivalent, you could look at the fact that they have to go through a lot of pain to bring children into the world. And that's something that they have to go through and experience. And that is to literally bring life, as well as metaphorically. So that might be an equivalent, but it also reflects the fact that they, I think, already understand this. Women are already much less self-centered, much less ego-centered, Judaism would say, and they're already on a high level as a result of that, whereas men have more correcting to do in this capacity, more of a need to understand and fix that past themselves. It's more egocentric and need-centric as opposed to focusing on what's needed of them. This, by the way, is why it was Adam who was told not to eat from the tree, not Eve, because Eve can take on self-consciousness, can take on an ego while having the good bits of it, but not being at risk as much of the bad elements of ego. Whereas for men, there is much more of a risk of them taking the bad parts. I mean, think about, certainly on a political level, the great evil political people who have done things for all the wrong reasons and been deeply destructive in this world have been men. And so I think that that's definitely going to be part of the answer, that women already have this understanding more inbuilt than men do. And when I said this actually to the person asking the question, who was a woman, she said, well, that's definitely an answer I can get behind. But I do think it's true. I really do think this is not just a nice answer, but it actually does reflect the truth. That when it comes to the ego, men have more work to do in improving this area than women. Anyway, thanks for watching and appreciate that you got this far. I'm Ollie and you're watching JTV.